Hi, everybody. Welcome to today's presentation brought to you by the New Jersey Pharmacists Association, Academy of Industry Pharmacists, and the Accreditation Council for Medical Affairs. I am Suzanne Solomon speaking to you. I'm currently the president of the New Jersey Academy of Industry Pharmacists, and our past president was Christine Grundy, and we have a few founding members who are probably on the call as well: Jim Ward, Allison Handler, Barbara Rossi, John Kalezi, and Steve Zlotnick. So for the agenda today, it's really just to welcome everybody, and then just to give you a brief update on NJPHA's Academy of Industry Pharmacists, and then a brief update on ACMA. And then we will have our webinar presented today by Dr. Monica Saleh, and she's going to be speaking specifically on medical affairs roles for pharmacists. So the mission of the Academy of Industry Pharmacists is to advance the interest of pharmacists within the pharmaceutical industry through awareness, education, and advocacy. And our vision really was to provide an ongoing platform for pharmacists with mutual interests who have interest in industry that will really support a diverse pharmacy network that encourages engagement and opportunity to connect, career development through educational initiatives such as this and more that we have planned in the future, as well as the advancement of the profession through advocacy. And we're going to work on different things together. New Jersey, as many of you might know, is home to a lot of pharmaceutical companies. So the thought was to really start this academy where we have many pharmacists working. More than 50% of pharmacists who work in industry actually live in New Jersey. So that was where the academy was born. So it's a unique academy. It affords its members the ability to advocate, partner, collaborate, and network with industry pharmacists. We have interprofessional development through continuing education. And we also promote the visibility of pharmacists within industry. So one of our goals is really to promote pharmacists in general within industries to really get the word out there as well. So membership does have its privileges, just being a member of NJPHA, but there's also a discounted rate of $30 if you are planning to join the academy. And there's a link right here if you're interested in joining the New Jersey Pharmacists Academy, Industry Academy. If you're interested, all the information can be found there, or you can message me directly or send me an email. Feel free to reach out. But there's really different ways you can join, either as an active pharmacist for the first year or 2 years, or you can, if you're a resident or fellow, or even if you're a student, there's a discounted rate. But there's really a lot of opportunities to join in things we do. So one of the things that we are really trying to work on is we're providing talks such as the one today, webinars and education, and then we are working on different advocacy programs. And one of the things that I wanted to just bring to light that we have talked about in the academy is even just with medical meetings, and many of you who work in industry have probably seen that if you work in industry and you're trying to attend a conference, the price of registration can be somewhere double, even triple that of just a healthcare professional. And so one of the things we're working on is really trying to figure out why that is. Why do folks who work in industry have to pay an exorbitant amount to attend a meeting? But we really work on other issues related to advocacy, public affairs. We provide CE, a lot of continuing education programs. And if you're based in New Jersey already, this just helps with getting all of your law CE and all of your live CE in as well. And also we have students and new practitioners and membership that way as well. All right, and with that, I am going to get over so that we can get this presentation started for today.
Thanks, Suzanne. My name is Elio Evangelista with the ACMA. NJPHA and ACMA have partnered to develop events and content, such as today's webinar. And this is actually the first event under the partnership. So we're really encouraged to see so many participants and registrants today. We hope to provide you more of these types of educational webinars for the members of NJPHA and also others who are interested in learning about the industry and opportunities for pharmacists in the industry. So without further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Monica Saleh, who's an MSL with Sanofi. And she's put together today's presentation, and it's going to outline the roles of pharmacists within the industry and their importance to specifically the medical affairs function.
Thank you, Elio, for the introduction, and thank you, Susie, for the presentation as well. And thank you, NJPHA and ACMA, for having me and giving me the opportunity to present to you guys today. So I'm just going to go quickly in the introduction of my background. So as Elio mentioned, my name is Monica Saleh. I am a PharmD by training, and I graduated in 2015 from Midwestern University Chicago College of Pharmacy. And pretty early on, I knew that I wanted to become work as a pharmacist in the industry. And so I applied to fellowships and I interviewed at mid-year in December of 2014 now. And I was able to land a fellowship with Baxalta at the time. And I was an in-house fellow, so that was in medical information, and we'll talk about what that is in just a few minutes. And so I completed my 1 year of fellowship, and then I became an MSL. I was able to break that and step into the MSL role, and I've been an MSL ever since. I've also been doing some consulting work with ACMA, or the Accreditation Council of Medical Affairs. And what I love about ACMA is that they're all about raising the bar in medical affairs. So this all began when in 2015, February of 2015, when the ACMA chairman and CEO met with several medical affairs leaders, and one of them said something to him that really changed his perspective in the industry, and he's been thinking about it ever since. That leader said, people don't really get what we do, and we all come from different background trainings, and but some of us think that we are basically the same as sales. So we need to professionalize and protect the integrity of our background, our education, as well as medical affairs. And that's really how the board certification of Medical Affairs Specialist program was born, out of passion, respect, and support for the medical affairs professional. So today we'll be talking a little bit about building your career path in the pharma and biotech industry. And how do we build on that? How do we get into industry and all that? So I'll be also able to answer you guys' questions. There is a Q&A functionality. So if you do have any questions, please utilize that function so that I'm able to address any Q&As at the end. But before we begin, out of curiosity, I just want to kind of have a better understanding of the audience, that are here today. We're going to launch a poll, and I just want to get a better understanding of the makeup of the audience from today's webinar. So we'll have it up there for about a minute or so. Okay, Elio, if you don't mind sharing the results. Awesome. So there is a good mixture of a lot of you guys. So that's great, and it's always great to see that there are industry pharmacists here with me. So thank you guys for joining as well. Awesome. Okay, so I'm going to be talking a little bit about the agenda for today. So we're going to be kind of having an overview of just what the life science industry is. Then we'll dig a little deeper into defining what medical affairs is in that department of the pharmaceutical world, and then also having a better understanding of some of the roles within that umbrella of medical affairs. So to dive deeper into the overview of life science industry. So when you think of the life science industry, we really think of two different industries. There's the biopharmaceutical and biotech industry, and then on a smaller scale, there's the medical device industry. When we're thinking of the current landscape of the biopharmaceutical industry, it's a big business. In 2019, it was a $1.2 trillion business, and it's forecasted to grow to 1.5 by 2023. There's always, with pharmaceutical companies, there's always going to be demands for new therapies, novel therapies, innovative therapies, and that's continuously growing in the emerging markets. As well as personalized medicine. So, medicine is growing tremendously right now, and there's more rare diseases that are coming in about, and there's more personalized medicine as well that's being developed, and that's really there to help curb any adverse events by allowing drugs to really succeed in development. And then when we think of our medical device industry, those are the market for wearable technology, for chronic diseases, and that market is also growing. It's a pretty big business as well. In 2018, it was a $426 billion business, and that's forecasted to become a $613 business by 2025, and then also quadrupling that by 2029. So as you can see here, there are two big industries that and they're very much necessary. But while they're really big, that doesn't go without saying that there are current challenges that the life industry faces. So what are these challenges? So we have, a rapid increase in the patient population around the world. So as we continue to grow in the world, so will the patient population. We're also seeing an increased number of aging patient population, needing more information and data and studies to understand the geriatric population and how some of these innovative, novel therapies apply to them. There's also rising drug prices. And so, yes, while the pharmaceutical industry is a very much patient-centric industry, even if other people tell you it's not, it really is. And I've been in the industry for about 6 years now, and truly the main focus is always the patient. But just like any business, there will always be competition. So even when you think to real estate, for example, when you think to one house in a block, if that one house is going to be $1 million, pretty much the whole neighborhood is also going to increase. So it's pretty much the same thing with the industry. To maintain that competition, there is rising drug prices as well. There's the opioid crisis that has been a challenge for quite some time now. And then there's the lack of trust in industry. It's had that reputation for quite some time, and it's hard to combat, to tell you the truth. But it is one of the challenges that the industry faces. And lastly, we have inappropriate interaction with healthcare providers. And so while as the pharmaceutical industry truly tries to train its employees and how to interact with healthcare providers, there are those that do take advantage of the time they have with healthcare providers, and there have been lawsuits with the industry for inappropriate interaction with healthcare providers. And so with that comes stringent compliance and corporate integrity agreements and whatnot. But those are the challenges that we currently face in the industry. And so kind of thinking about the amount of money it actually takes, how much do you guys think? I know that you guys can't necessarily answer me, but put a number in your mind about how much do you think it costs to bring a new drug to market. You'll be surprised to know that it's about $2.6 billion to bring one prescription drug to market today. And that's, that's because it takes an average of 10 to 14 years to develop a drug. Of course, we've seen some changes this last year with the COVID vaccine and, how that was brought to market. And we never know, we may be able to see, that evolve as well over the years and how fast we can bring drugs to market. But it truly does take amazing amount of manpower, studies, trials, safety, efficacy, all those things to be able to bring a drug to market, and it requires that much money. And so there's also been a shift in the type of drugs that are coming to market. So, you know, as there is that shift that, you know, from small molecules and larger populations, we are able to now have more biologics and biosimilars being developed, even things like gene therapy. So a lot of more specialized and complex molecules are being developed. And this really has fueled a significant increase in the demand of well-trained clinical and scientific professionals. So what does that mean for a medical affairs professional? This means that, you know, as medical affairs professional, we have to be on top of our game regarding the scientific knowledge and being able to not just understand it, but also communicate that knowledge with our HCPs and the providers that treat that drug. And so we see here in 2010, the FDA was able to grant more specialty drugs. And so there's a lot more specialty drugs on the market than there are traditional drugs. And so kind of going back to medical affairs really quickly, and needing to kind of evolve as the market evolves. So there has been a huge portion of the medical affairs role, whether it be field-based MSLs or office-based, such as medical information, to really be able to focus on communicating the clinical data both clearly and concisely. There's also been the responsibility to be able to generate evidence to support the clinical claims, and companies are requiring more medical affairs professionals that really understand the science and communicate it really well. So you can kind of see where I'm going with this, right? That for, you know, for medical affairs to be a successful department, it truly requires exceptional, you know, candidates within that department to be able to communicate the science. So let's focus a little bit about what medical affairs is. I'm going to take you all down history lane really quickly. So, and kind of just understanding, you know, where medical affairs came about and, you know, the path that it's been on. So in 1958, PhRMA, or the Pharmaceutical Research and Manufacturers of America, was established. And if you're unfamiliar what that term means, it's a entity that requires the biopharmaceutical industry in the States and set forth policies to be able to guide the industry so that it's able to you know, provide safe and efficacious drugs. And so that was developed in 1958. In 1967, Upjohn Pharmaceuticals, which is not around any longer, it was acquired by Pfizer actually. They were the first company that established an MSL team. In the late 1990s, medical affairs was really a supportive role. It was in the background, and it was more of an operation role that reported into marketing. And you're probably thinking, well, wait a minute, isn't marketing a commercial team? Yes, it is. So medical was reporting into commercial. That was in the late 1990s. A lot has changed since then. In 2002, PhRMA code was developed. So they developed this policy to really have a better understanding or provide guidance really of interaction with HCPs, whether that be commercial or medical. And in 2004, PhRMA code of interaction with HCPs was updated. And truly, it's the makeup of the two between 2002 and 2004 that's been guiding us this whole time now, well into 2021. Yes, there have been updates here and there, but the majority of the interaction or policies around interaction with HCPs have come around the PhRMA code that was developed back in 2002 and 2004. So if you're ever wondering what the communication and interaction policies entail, it's really easily accessible through their website. In 2005, most companies started establishing that firewall between medical affairs and commercials. So medical affairs started to kind of become its own department, no longer reporting into commercial, And from there, they started to only, from there, they only grew to become more of a leading role. In 2009, most major pharmaceutical companies began requiring a D degree for medical affairs roles and MSLs. So that means MD, PharmD, PhD, anything really with a D degree. However, more recently than not, I personally have been seeing more, NPs, RNs. However, those do need to be a little bit more specialized. And then in 2010, the HEOR teams, or the Health Economic Outcome Research teams, started to increase and were included in the medical affairs function area. In 2014, ACMA was born, and then in 2015, the first ever board certification for medical affairs and MSLs were developed, and this is the Board Certified Medical Affairs Specialist program. In 2016, the concept of traditional KOLs, or key opinion leaders, expanded to include patient advocates, regulatories, and payers. And I'm going to back up here for those that don't necessarily understand what key opinion leader or KOL means. Key opinion leaders is a term that you'll hear in the pharmaceutical industry referring to HCPs that have a high influence on a specific therapeutic area, and they have an influence on other HCPs, and so they're considered to be thought leaders. So those are the KOLs, or the HCPs, that you'll see speaking at symposiums at congresses, becoming investigators on trials, doing speaker programs for companies. So those are the type of HCPs that are considered key opinion leaders. There are levels of key opinion leaders. So there are regional, national, local. So it just depends on truly the influence that they're able to have on, a territory, or how big of a space they're able to have an influence on. And then in 2018, predictive analytics started to come about, and that's really driving medical affairs strategy, or helping drive that strategy. So now that we've taken a history lesson on medical affairs, I'm going to go a little bit into defining what medical affairs is. So with medical affairs, it's truly kind of the middleman. You have your clinical development, and those are really high scientists, right? Like your bench scientists and those that develop the products, and then you have your commercial. And so medical affairs is somewhere in the middle, where they are able to take the science from clinical development and disseminate that. And then commercial is obviously they're there to sell. And we'll get into the difference between commercial and medical affairs in just a second. But they're truly kind of like a middleman. And they're involved in two primary goals: truly to be able to data disseminate and communicate, and also to data generate. And lastly, they're also, able to kind of take from the field or from the community and bring that back to the company. So, so that's really truly medical affairs. And we've seen a tremendous growth within, the last few years. So, as I mentioned, in about 2005, so only like 16 years ago, medical affairs became its own department. And since then, we've seen a 300% growth in the number of MSLs that were hired from 2001 to 2015. That shows how much the demand has increased. And it continues to increase as well, with the more specialized products and therapies out on the market. And also 80% year-over-year, we've seen a growth by 80% in the medical affairs budget. We're able to do more and more with that. And then over here, the last kind of number here is that there's over 506 compounds for rare disease under review. So this only goes to show you that there will continue to be a high need for candidates to be a part of the industry to support the medical affairs roles. And here we kind of have a little bit of a breakdown of medical affairs by degree, and this was a 739 sample size for the survey that was taken. And so you can see here that PharmDs make the highest amount of people within the medical affairs department, followed by PhDs and then MDs as well. And then you'll have some folks that have master's degree, bachelor's, and then other degrees as well as other doctorate degrees. Okay, I did get a notice saying that someone can't see the slides. Elio or Suzanne, can you guys confirm that you can see the slides on your end?
Yes, I can see them.
Okay.
I can see them.
Okay, thank you. I just had a chat, so I just wanted to make sure that the majority of folks can see the slides. Thank you. Okay, so as I already mentioned, so science is always evolving and medical affairs organizations must also evolve as well. So medical affairs organizations need to position themselves to have a greater impact on the healthcare ecosystem that they seek to serve. So professionals within the medical affairs department need to be more than just disease and product specialists, but they need to sort of be connectors of outcome-focused information. So with that being said, this is sort of the effective, medical clinical professional. So they do meet the HCP's expectations by having a specialized therapeutic area knowledge. And usually you'll see these medical affairs teams, they're truly focused on one disease state. So when you are in the pharmaceutical industry and you work for a medical affairs department, you're specialized in that therapeutic area knowledge and you become truly the subject matter expert there. You're able to differentiate insights and be able to gather insightful information back to the company from these HCPs, and you're able to provide comprehensive responses to the HCP's requests, and those are typically unsolicited requests. Unsolicited requests, yes. And then you also, as a medical professional within the industry, you are expected to also have a broad health system understanding. So let's dive a little deeper and go into an overview of the different roles within medical affairs. So medical affairs is an umbrella term. So when you hear someone work for medical affairs, it could be one of those things right here. And this truly differs from company to company. So large pharmaceutical companies, you'll see that there are more departments within medical affairs or smaller kind of categories within medical affairs. Whereas smaller pharmas, you'll see that some of these may be combined just because of the amount of people that work within that small pharma. And this differs from company to company, like I mentioned. So there might be more departments here in, again, like I said, like in larger pharmas, and I'll kind of touch base on what that means in a second. So when you think medical affairs, umbrella term, under it you'll see there's the field medical teams, and so that makes up the MSLs as well as the managed care team. There's also so this is truly the only field-based remote working position within medical affairs. And typically MSLs, and we'll talk about MSLs in just a second, they cover a specific territory and they're required to live in that territory. And they meet with HCPs and KOLs within that territory. Almost everything else is an in-house position. And I believe I'm talking to the New Jersey Pharmacists Associations. You guys are in a wonderful location, or the majority of folks on this call today are at least a part of the East Coast. So you guys are in a wonderful location to be able to have access to some of these in-house positions. So medical information is another kind of category there, medical publications, medical education, medical grants, and under medical education, you'll see the CME. That's where the CMEs are developed, as well as speaker programs. In some companies, speaker programs can be a commercial role, or even another role has kind of been developing, recently called the thought leader liaisons, and those are report to commercial, and they kind of handle, literally their sole job is to do speaker programs. And so, but in other companies, speaker programs can kind of fall under the medical education umbrella. And then there's the investigated initiated trial, and that falls under the medical grants. In some companies, their pharmacovigilance, or where you kind of report the AEs, though that may report to medical affairs, and sometimes its own department as well. So what is a medical science liaison? So they, like I mentioned, are field-based scientific professionals that work either in the pharmaceutical, biotech, or device organizations or companies that work to really foster a relationship between HCPs, KOLs, and the company. So the job is in the title, right? So medical science liaisons, they liaise between the community and the company. And their core function is to facilitate collaborative exchange of information. So they are the subject matter experts in a disease state. So the KOLs and HCPs really depend on MSLs to provide the latest data and kind of for the MSL to be a medical resource to them. And also the medical science liaison gathers information from the field, whether it be unmet needs or even just insight on experience, and brings that back to the company. MSLs in some companies may be called different things. It's mostly known as MSLs, but they can also be called clinical liaisons, regional medical liaisons, regional research scientists, medical liaisons or MLs, and then managed care liaisons, although more recently managed care has sort of been its own thing as well. I've also heard medical advisor, associate director, medical affairs. There's a lot of names. If that's something that you're interested in and you're kind of in the market to, for an MSL job, just know that it's not necessarily going to be called medical science liaison always, but that is the most common name. And there are different levels of MSL. So just because you're an MSL, you're not an MS, you don't have to be an MSL for life. There is a career path there. So you can, be an MSL or senior MSL, principal or executive MSL. You can become a field director of MSLs, and so you can manage MSLs. So those are, the ones at least that are field-based. You can, of course, then, like I mentioned, go in-house after that as well, if you'd like. And the good thing about, and I'm going to go kind of back for 1 second here, the good thing about medical affairs and why I'm so passionate about it is that within medical affairs, if you're an MSL and you decide, okay, I'm kind of, I've done all I can to, in an MSL world, and I want to grow and be something else, you can go to an in-house position, like I mentioned, and all these different categories within medical affairs truly works to have an impact on the patient population. And so whether you're an MSL talking to an HCP in person, or medical information talking to an HCP, answering the request over the phone, you're still having that impact on a patient. So MSLs are kind of again, like in the middle of when you think of like science, they're sort of in the middle. Yes, they have to be subject matter experts and know the science really, really well. But when you think of, how that is on the scale, you'll see here, if you're looking at the low depth of scientific concentration and then thinking also business acumen or business focus, sales reps usually have the highest business focus, right? They're selling yes, they understand the science, but they don't need to really know more than what they can say, which is really basically what's written in the PI. Whereas you have also specialty reps and then managed care medical affairs. So again, those are sort of the same type of science, knowledge needed. And you'll see here medical science liaisons are kind of within that as well. And then you'll have those that have high scientific depth of knowledge with lower business concentrations, and that's your bench scientists and clinical development folks. So I have here a quote by Keith Allen. He's a medical director at Novartis. And I wrote this quote because I think I put it here because I think he captured medical affairs really well. And I bolded some of the words just so that I can kind of grab your attention to some of these words to really have you contemplate on medical affairs and what we truly do. And so I'm going to read it, verbatim here, but I want you to really kind of see these words and kind of let it, linger with you. So Keith said that we are now looking at the medical community as an ongoing strategic investment, a long-term, mutually beneficial partnership, whereas before it was more transactional, more sporadic. The medical affairs function is more strategic as we act as ambassadors and facilitators of information exchange, delivering insight back into development. It calls for a broader set of capabilities, more business acumen, and greater alignment with the commercial goal of the company. So I took what Keith said and I put it into some sort of medical affairs cycle. And this truly, really is what happens. So if you're ever thinking really, what does an MSL do? This is really the core of what we do. So an MSL, and I really don't even know where to start in the cycle because it's truly like a feedback loop. So an MSL will meet with the HCP, they'll gather insights. The insights will then go into becoming a medical strategy. It will go to the HCP will meet with the MSL will gather insights, and so on and so forth. So you can see here that there has to be some sort of medical strategy, right? And objectives. And these come from what MSLs learn from the field, from these HCPs, from what these HCPs need in the community, kind of bridging that gap a little bit more. Of course, there are some influences. So HCPs gather their information from MSLs, from the clinical trials and data that are presented to them, from patients. So patients are smart people. They get their information from dinner programs, from commercials, from talking to their community. I work in a very specified disease. So I work in hemophilia, and the hemophilia patient community is so tight and close that they all influence each other, and they go to camp together in the summer, and they all exchange this information together. And so patients are smart people, so they usually will come to the HCP saying, I heard of this drug, I want to be on it. And so so HCPs gather their obviously insights, and not insights, but their knowledge and information and what they relay to the MSL through patients, clinical trials and data, as well as major congresses. And then the MSL takes that information as insights, gives it back to the company, and then the company then helps make a medical strategy. And so that guides the MSL to be able to have these meetings with these KOLs. Other influences that kind of affect the strategy of a company, or the medical strategy really, is they still have to be aligned with commercial strategy, right? They can't have their own type of thoughts about what they want to communicate in the field. But there's a lot more that MSLs obviously can do versus commercial. But they do have to follow a main strategy. And then there's also the global medical strategy, as opposed to here, in this diagram, I'm talking specifically about US. So the US has to align with global as well. So a lot of times, whenever it's really hard to explain what I do to people, and so a lot of times when I say that I'm an MSL, I work for a pharmaceutical company, and I try to say something around the lines of I work in the medical side, and then people are like, okay, so you promote, you go sell, and I'm like, I don't do that. So sales reps sell. I am a medical science liaison. So what's the difference? So sales reps will basically promote products. They usually only are able to talk on label information. They can bring in samples, and they call on physicians who basically provide only patient care. Whereas MSLs, to that specific point, can call really on anybody that is involved in the science. So I call on PhDs that are involved in the bench science of with our products, or even PTs, or or nurses, just to provide that medical education. Whereas sales reps will probably only call on the provider that's writing a prescription. They may or may not have scientific background or advanced degrees, and they're truly only evaluated on their sales metrics. So they need to sell to be able to get money. So those are all, great differences between sales reps and MSLs. MSLs have an interaction that is considered to be peer-to-peer education. I am a PharmD, I'm talking to an MD, we're peers. So I'm providing that peer-to-peer education and information exchange. I may be able to talk on label and off label, of course, compliantly. I can't just go promote off label unless, it's a reactive request from the KOL in our conversations. But as an MSL, we know a few tricks up our sleeves to be able to kind of probe a little bit deeper and deeper, to be able to kind of ask specific questions that may be considered off-label. To be able, again, like, we're not doing it to promote this off-label, but to be able to gather information and insight to bring it back to the company. And like I mentioned, we call on HCPs in various settings. It could be hospital, academia, research, agencies, clinics, etc. And we're not evaluated on how well a product is doing. If it's not doing well at all, we're still getting the same salary, but our bonuses may be affected by the performance that we are able to have in these engagements. And that's like any company, right? When there's bonuses involved, that just means that they're seeing how well are you doing to get a bonus, right? But our salary itself is not based on how well a product is doing. I also wanted to touch base quickly on medical information specialist and what that means. And so medical information is basically, if you ever have a product question, the first thing you might do as a pharmacist is look on on either the PI or and of course you'll do your quick research on Lexicomp or whatever, and if you can't find the information, you'll probably grab the box, the product box, and see the number on there and call them. So when you call, that's where you go to the medical information specialist. So those are also staffed by highly specialized people that are either PharmDs or PhDs, but mainly PharmDs, and they provide comprehensive, compliant product and disease state information to HCPs and consumers upon request. So they're not calling on people like MSLs are. MSLs kind of proactively reach out to HCPs and have reactive conversations, whereas medical information gets calls all day and are answering these calls, answering these questions through these calls. And so how do they respond? They basically evaluate the literature, analyze statistics, assess prescribing pattern, troubleshoot drug information issues, such as drug safety, AEs, and other medical related concerns. They may tap into internal folks, maybe even clinical development, or just to kind of understand something that may not be publicly available, to be able to answer some of these questions. And they are able to talk to patients as well, which is something great. So a lot of my pharmacists that are like, oh, I don't know if I want to be in industry. I'm going to be sad that I'm going to miss that patient, interaction. Medical information specialists are able to talk to patients, but that's only when they call. So, and that's kind of, again, the same thing, in the pharmacy world, right? And as a retail pharmacist, you're not going around giving unsolicited advice to everyone. You're waiting for people to come to your pharmacy and kind of ask questions. So sort of the same thing, but through a phone. What else do I want to mention here? And so it's kind of, if you think about it, if you think back to sort of pharmacy school, and if you've done like a drug information, paper, or, I know that there was like a course on it, at least in my school, That's sort of the same thing, but not as stringent. So you do come up with these standard response letters for frequently asked questions and whatnot. But it truly is an amazing role, and I that was my fellowship, and I truly enjoyed doing it for the year that I was I did it for with Baxalta. And then there's other key roles that I'm going to quickly mention, and then I'll open it up to questions. So there's a pharmacovigilance specialist. Those are the folks that will kind of have an ongoing surveillance of the product to be able to maintain the drug safety profile. They'll be the ones to kind of track AEs regarding a specific product, and also that's the department where they're required by law to submit these AEs to the FDA so that the FDA also is aware. Then there's the publication planning. So whenever you go to congresses and you see a beautiful poster, there's a great publication planning person behind it, and so those are the ones that coordinate medical publications through peer-reviewed journals. They'll be involved in the communicating with clinical to analyze the data specifically and understand the new findings and be able to prepare abstracts, manuscripts, poster presentations for congresses. And then there's the medical writers. So they do the grunt of the work. They compile, they write, they edit medical writing, and they are the ones that will be involved in submitting clinical research and findings to the FDA. And their writing is also what's taken and that's used in publications, medical journals, and also internal company use. But whenever you read, a study, there's a medical writer within a pharmaceutical company that participated in writing that paper. And I think that is all. So I am going to stop sharing, and thank you all for attending. And I would like to take a few questions. I know that we have about 10 minutes, so I'll take questions now. So let me stop sharing my screen. All right. Okay. So I got a question about a registered pharmacist. So what about registered pharmacists? So that's a great question. And I feel like more so now than before, again, as much as they've kind of been saying, D degree, a lot of times they're open, again, like I mentioned, to other, backgrounds. And so while our PHs or registered pharmacists are still pharmacists, they absolutely are just as qualified as a PharmD or an RN or an NP. Absolutely, I think there wouldn't be a problem there. And then someone said MSL sounds like a sales rep. Yes, so I just addressed that in my slides. So no, we don't sell, we don't promote, we don't really, we're not based on that information. If anything, think of us as a medical resource. So how will HCP, especially even more so like in COVID, medical congresses have been canceled or virtual. And when I meet with my HCPs, I'm constantly asking them if they attended a Congress, virtually, and they would say, well, no, because it came on a clinic day. And while when I used to go to congresses in person, I used to be able to, just, truly be there. But if I'm in a virtual Congress, I'm going to be multitasking. So they've been truly relying on us to deliver the latest data, whereas sales reps can't do that. They're not able to communicate data that is not on label. So any new data that comes out, they're not able to basically communicate that. Someone asked, still not sure how MSLs are evaluated, not clear, still seems to be on the usage of product, explain. So great question. So, there are metrics still for MSLs. And so we are expected to meet with KOLs. In bigger companies and larger pharmaceutical companies, the only way they'll understand how an MSL is doing is kind of by putting a number on it. And so understanding, that MSLs do need to meet with a certain amount of KOLs, but that's to make sure that we are delivering the data that needs to be delivered so that these KOLs can make the prescribing decisions that they need to make. However, there are soft metrics too, and our field directors, my manager, is required to go in the field with me to assess the quality of my meetings. And so is it going to be a very surface level meeting, which is not what we're aiming for here. We want it to be deep science, meaningful conversations. And so quarterly, my manager is expected to go with me in the field and assess my MSL skills and be able to really develop the MSLs to kind of have really truly meaningful conversations. And this also, again, think of it as a two-way street. They're looking to assess my MSL skills to be able to provide information to the KOL and the quality of meetings, but also the insights that I am bringing back to be able to have an impact on what's next in development, right? And so if there's, for example, a gap in the field about a specific disease, and there's a trend in the amount of insights that are coming in about that specific gap, then clinical development is going to do something about it. So we're absolutely essential in the sense that the quality of our meetings are also being evaluated as well. Someone asked, what's the typical day-to-day look like in a life of an MSL, especially pre-COVID? That's a great question. And the MSL day-to-day is so different. And that's what I absolutely love about this job, is that I never get bored. I really have so many things I work on. So it's whether I am meeting, my main priority, of course, is meeting with KOLs. They are my true priority. But there are so many things that we're working on, whether it's be developing resources and slide decks to be able to use in the field. So assisting with that. So of course we'll hire vendors and whatnot, but assisting with really the science behind it. Pre-COVID, the pre-COVID days, we used to, go to congresses. So planning for congresses. So in Congress planning, you attend, you're expected to attend sessions. You are expected to cover a medical affairs booth or medical information booth. You're expected to meet with KOLs and maybe in combination with medical leadership as well. So day-to-day is so different. I can't necessarily speak about a day-to-day, but we are, pre-COVID, we were expected to go meet with these KOLs in person and have these quality meetings with them. But when we're not in the office, we are basically studying, right? Like becoming more experts in our therapeutic area, having journal clubs with the team, attending internal meetings, of course. And then also Congress planning, being involved in, different projects, whether that may be, content development or slide deck development. So very different. Every day is so different. And really, if you're looking for something that's not so routine, MSL, jobs are pretty much that. Someone asked what opportunities for leadership growth is there for an MSL. So I sort of touched base on that a little bit. You can become higher level as an MSL. And then there's also the opportunity to become a field director of an MSL, but you can also go in-house and do other things, right? As by taking that transferable knowledge of an MSL, so you can become a medical director and help with the strategy that medical is built on. And you can become a director of medical information. So there's so many different opportunities. It's not a one career path. And in the 3 companies that I've worked for, or really there are 2 companies really, but in the 2 companies I've worked for, they've done such a great job of having a path where you can go either horizontally or vertically. And so you don't necessarily have to be on an MSL path. You can kind of go in different directions within medical affairs, and there's so many opportunities for growth. If anything, I think it's more than there are for retail and community clinical pharmacists. Someone asked, what advice do you have for current PharmD students interested in becoming MSLs, especially concerning pursuing fellowship versus residency after graduation? So that's a great question, and it's a hard one to answer only because it just depends really on what you want to do. So as an industry, I feel like every day I have an impact on the patient population through the KOLs I communicate with. And so you have to decide whether you want to go the industry route or the residency route. If you do go the residency route, it's never too late. Actually, it's also just as great of a way to get into industry. So say you go into the residency route, you become a clinical pharmacist, say on oncology. Later in life, once you kind of have done oncology pharmacist, clinically for some time and you're ready for a career move, you can absolutely apply for oncology MSL, and you would be just as qualified, if not more qualified, than MSLs that don't have oncology experience. So you can go that route, or you can decide to do the fellowship route. And there are other ways too, by the way. It doesn't have to be fellowship or residency. There are multiple ways of getting in the industry. But as a pharmacy student, and if you're thinking about fellowships, and if you do decide to do the fellowship route, then mid-year is your best friend. I don't know how things are with COVID, but mid-year was where fellowship interviews happen. And from there, they invite you for an on-site interview. And then from there, you are given a fellowship, or you get a fellowship and you start basically after pharmacy school. So sort of similar to residency. Someone asked, are you seeing more RNs in the medical info call center versus PharmD? So call centers are actually have been more of an increasing department. So there's your in-house medical information, and then they also vendor out a medical information center. So these medical information center are the ones to get the call first. And they are absolutely staffed by RNs and NPs. And then if they need to escalate it to something that requires more literature research or internal collaboration, then they will escalate it to the PharmD in-house. And don't get me wrong, PharmDs in-house are still really busy. There's so many questions that come daily that there's always so many questions are escalated daily to the medical information in-house versus medical information call center. Someone asked, let's see, as an MSL, do you feel like you get any patient exposure, or is it primarily more health professionals? So you don't get we're unfortunately compliantly are not able to speak to patients. We're only able to speak to healthcare professionals that have an impact on patients. So I feel like I have an impact on patients through my KOLs. And I have a great relationship with my KOLs, where one of them, if they feel like they can't figure out, something, they may call on me, and, I may be able to guide them a little bit. Of course, at the end of the day, it's their decision, but I may be able to, guide them a little bit. So, so with that, I don't have patient interaction, but I only have that patient impact through my KOLs. However, medical information, you do have that impact on the patients by being able to talk to them if they do call, the medical information number. And I just realized that it is 10 o'clock Pacific, so that's 1 o'clock Eastern. So I am going to answer maybe one more question. Let's see. What skills are needed to become an MSL? So you can be multiple things, but you can be, like I said, PharmD, MD, PhD. But another way, to get in and to have kind of these skills and raising that bar is becoming a board certified medical affairs specialist. And, it's a really well-rounded program. If you are interested in wanting to look more into it, visit the ACMA website. So that's one way to kind of get these skills to become an MSL. You are basically board certified. So just like we are in the pharmacy world, you're specifically board certified for specific disease states, board certification for medical affairs is also something that you can look into, and it absolutely raises that bar, a step to kind of make you more qualified as an MSL. And so with that, I'm going to end this call. Thank you all for attending. I'm sorry I couldn't get to all the questions. There were so many, and I appreciate all the questions. But I hope this was at least insightful. And if you want to get in contact with me, please reach out to me on LinkedIn, connect with me. It's all about networking in this pharmacy world and the industry world. So feel free to connect with me, and I'm happy to chat more. Thank you all. Have a good rest of your afternoon.